Good morning, good afternoon. oh, Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I am so happy to be here to introduce the fourth Q&A session of the on-demand virtual course Initiation into Spiritism. As you may recall, this course started earlier this year, with the focus of bringing discussions based on the book by Teresinha Oliveira. How does the course work? Each week on Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern, a new lesson is released. Spiritist speakers from all over the U.S. will address 1 to 2 chapters of Teresinha's book. I'm so happy to be here to be a part of this live dialogue. Today, we are focusing on the content of lessons 19 through 22. I am happy. Thank you for joining us today on this live session. Just a quick reminder, we have already received questions. Thank you very much. But I want to invite all of you listening now to send us your comments or additional questions via the chat window. And now, let's welcome Kirsten de Melo from
Good
Maryland.
morning. Hello.
Hi, Kirsten.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Hi, Peter.
Suzana Simoes from
Hello,
Florida.
everybody.
Hi,
Hello, good morning. Hi,
Good morning.
Kirsten. Hi, Peter.
Hi,
Sue.
Suzana. Marcia Trajano from Tennessee.
Hi, everyone. Good
Hi,
to be
Marcia.
here.
Hey, Martha.
And if she's available right now, Cintya Guimaraes. If not, she will join us soon. All right, I would like to welcome each presenter to provide a short summary of their lessons, about 5 minutes. So let's start with Kirsten de Melo, who will give us a synopsis of chapter 19, Blessed Are Those Who Mourn. Kirsten.
Yes. Thank you so much, Peter. Blessed are those who mourn. What a great chapter, and so relevant for today's day. But in a very brief, quick summary, the chapter covers things like possible reasons for our current sufferings, practical ways for us to manage those types of sufferings, and also to learn to resign ourselves to the designs of God. So, in essence, I think the best way I can shorten it and really illustrate this for you, it's kind of like the life of a lobster. And if you know the life of a lobster, they go through that molting season. If you're a male lobster, you go through once a year. If you're female, it's twice a year. But basically, as the male or female lobster grows and grows and grows, they grow out of their exoskeleton and they have to shed it. So it's the same for us. We have to learn that as we're growing, at some point we're going to experience a painful process. So in this beautiful lesson, learning to trust God, and that our pain won't be taken away, but yet we will find consolation. We will find peace in the journey that we all must endure. So that, in a very, very small nutshell, I wanted to share that.
So great to hear from you, Kirsten.
Thanks.
Let's move on, and we will now have Suzana Simoes, who will provide a summary of chapter 20, Disincarnation. Suzana?
Yes, so this chapter brings a very interesting perspective on death or the dying process. And what is really unique about the Spiritist approach, and when thinking about the dying process, is that we differentiate between the death of the physical body. When you look at someone and say, well, this person died, to what we call the discarnation process, which is the actual separation of the spirit from the physical body. So this lesson talks specifically, helps us to understand the difference between both, explains, define the process talks about the phases of the process, which we touch more in depth during the class, but how the process is gradual, how it goes from the toes to the head, the review process that the spirit undergoes, as well as the state of confusion. So the class touches in all those aspects that are part of the discarnation process, this detachment uh, of the spirit from the physical body. And also, it talks about the circumstances. So, in the class, we go over different circumstances. So, usually, from a very material perspective, what do we consider a good death? So, most people say, well, just die in his or her sleep, or you were alive in one moment and dead on the next moment. There was no suffering. Is that really what a good death is from the spiritual perspective? So we're going to look into aging, illnesses, accidents, as well as cultural aspects or knowledge of the spiritual life. Is this helpful or not? We're looking into, so what happens after we die? So burial, cremation, is there a difference? Does the spirit care? Is the spirit present during its own memorial service, for example? And then last but not least, we see probably one of the greatest trials that we can have on this planet is to see a little child dying, right? So we're always struck by incredible grief and pain. I mean, the dying process is a trial for all of us, as we learn in the Spirit's book. But then when a child dies, then we are even like more challenged by that occurrence. So what is the meaning behind, and why does it even happen? So this is what the points that our lesson covered, and so that's it. We'll hope to be able to answer your questions now.
Okay, thank you for the summary, Suzana. Next, let's hear from Marcia Trajano, who will talk about Chapter 21, Trials and Expiation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for being here, right? I spoke several weeks ago about the chapter 20, chapter 21st, which was lesson 18, as Peter mentioned. And it's almost like we could all talk about the life of a lobster. So thank you, Kirsten, for that allegory, right? Because this chapter, as I explained previously, it is the explanation of what does it mean, a world of trials expiation. Why is it even important? So real briefly, I just wanted to give in this summary that first of all, this topic, trials and expiations, or testings and atonement, as it may be referred by some and others, it is included vastly in all of the Spiritist literature. So we find it in the Spirit's book, we find it in the Gospel according to Spiritism, Genesis, Heaven and Hell. Even in the Spiritist Review, you find references to that concept. So this is why it was important for us to come to this lesson and speak break it down a little bit further. But it's all about the fact that we, the lobster, right? We are immortal spirits. We don't die. And as we go through the molting, right, Kirsten, I keep thinking of you, there will be activities that you have to go through, and there will be, in many cases, suffering and pain. So first, it's vastly found, and second, it's the question that we, as immortal spirits, and we go through the hierarchies of different types of worlds. And today, all of us here live in a world that is considered a world of trials and expiations. So as I bring sorry, as I bring that notion, I have to go back to explain very quickly that if we live in a category world, what are the other categories, right? So they are number one, the primitive worlds, the second, the worlds of trials and expiations, third one, which is the world of regenerating worlds, regenerative worlds, and finally, blessed worlds. So, sorry, and the final one, the fifth one, which is the celestial or divine world. So we have 5 categories of worlds, and we live in the second one. Wow. uh, it's early in our immortal evolutionary path, right? And if I can, in just a few seconds, give the definitions that you find in uh, about those worlds, right? We can talk about primitive worlds is our first incarnations, and it's really the beginning of our journey. The second one, where we live today, it's simply put, don't get scared, but this is what the Cosmogonian Spiritism says, it's where evil predominates. All right? Third one, regenerating world, is where our souls, right, will still have to atone, but there is a moment also to regenerate and rest. Fourth world, the blessed worlds, are the place where we finally, evil is no longer predominating and good outranks, right? And the last one is the divine or celestial worlds, where all the pure spirits live and only goodness exists. So in a brief conclusion, we have to understand that the world that we live in, the world of trials and expiations or tests and atonements, is where evil predominates. And we stop to say, what? How can you, Marcia, tell that the world and consequently we, right, ourselves, evil exists and predominates? I don't understand. And that's when I would like to give this really important message that, first of all, what is evil? And evil is just our capacity to hurt, to inflict pain. And that capacity to inflict pain is toward ourselves and the others. So we just graduated, if you will, from the primitive world. And this is where we are, right? We are good, but we still have this enormous capacity to hurt ourselves, to hurt others. And as such, we could say, right, as the gospel says, evil is very much alive inside of us. Our capability to hurt, the capacity to hurt, is very much close to us. And finally, when we say the capacity to hurt, just means that we are very much based on an individualistic, self-centered way of living. Therefore, we don't think about our impact to others in this collective system that we live. So, briefly stated, Earth and all of us that live on Earth belong to this category of world of test and atonement. And because of what that means, right, we can assume that each and every one of us are the lobster, right? We're going through some type of pain. So the knowledge of that will really change everything. Hope this helps.
Great to hear from you, Marcia. Let's wrap up with Cintya Guimaraes. Welcome, Cintya, who will summarize Chapter 22, Inequalities of Wealth.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm very happy to be back here to speak a little bit further on this topic. And in this topic, we discussed the Spiritist's view on why distribution and enjoyment of wealth on the planet is so unequal, why economic disparity is so prevalent among us, right? And during the lesson, we learned why some, and we discussed why some are born rich and some are born very poor, why some are able to make a successful living while others really struggle and sometimes not even make it. We also learned and discussed about reincarnation being the only logical, plausible justification, the only way to explain logically why all of this happens is reincarnation. We also learned that because of that, related to reincarnation, right? We are immortal souls that are destined to progress and achieve relative perfection. And this only happens when we learn how to handle all different types of situations in life, right? Everything that life presents to us, we need to handle, we need to know how to manage. And that includes situations of poverty and or wealth. We know that, and we discussed that one existence is not enough for one human being learn everything that it has to learn, right? Not only in this area, but in all segments of life. So that's why reincarnation comes into place. We learn that we all will face one or another of these situations. We will be either poor or wealthy. We were in the past, we will be in the future, or we are now, because we all have to learn, again, those two types of situation. And we discussed that God actually puts us in those different situations of poverty or wealth to test us, right? And also as a tool for us to progress. And that happens not only with poverty or wealth, in all segments of our life where we have to progress intellectually, materially, spiritually, psychologically, we will face that, right? For instance, in wealth, we will need to learn, and God will test us, our charity, mercy, our compassion, our self-denial. While in poverty, God will test us and will make us learn one way or the other, honesty, patience, simplicity, humility, resignation, and so many other virtues that a life of poverty well lived will give us. We also talked about a little bit further on the reasons for the inequality on the planet, right? And we learned that at the level of evolution or lack thereof, right, on this planet, human beings do not know how to create and maintain and sustain wealth. Also, we know that this is the case because, unfortunately, selfishness and materialism still dominate on the planet. It could also be because we do not apply ourselves to learn or to work as we should in order to obtain wealth and what we need. So that will cause, evidently, right, people not to achieve minimum needs, minimum ways to meet their material, their physical needs. It could also be, we learned during the lesson too, that it could also be a matter of reparation, of expiation. So these were some of the things that we learned. We learned the reason for what wealth is, why wealth is put in the hands of people, right? And we know that we learned that wealth is a creating force of progress. And it is there as a gift that God gives us in order to create, to benefit society as a large, with everything that money can help. Create education, opportunities of education, create jobs, create inventions that will, again, benefit society at large. We talked a bit of poverty too. We talked about both of them and how difficult and or not so difficult they are. And I think I'll not speak so much about it because maybe some of the questions will be about it, and then we're not going to spoil the surprise, right? And basically, that's what we did. These discussions, questions that most of us have asked explicitly or have thought of sometime during our life. And basically that's it. I just want to apologize and ask you to bear with me because I had technical problems with my computer, and to save the day, I am joining very gladly to be here, but I'm joining with my phone, and I'm trying to get an angle that's not so awkward here. So thank you very much, guys.
All right. Thank you for your summary, Cintya. Now, let's move to our final part of today's program. We will address your questions. Please send them via chat. Beginning with the questions previously sent, we will proceed in round robin style, one question per speaker. Let's start with Kirsten. All right, Kirsten, so here's the question. Why does life have to impose sorrows or moments in which we experience pain, challenges, or difficulties? And there's another part. Can you address the notion that what we suffer is often caused by our actions within this lifetime?
First, Peter, and for everyone, I wanted to address the fact that there are two reasons or sources of why we suffer. And one is which that is predestined or preordained, if you want to put it in that perspective, but ones that already were programmed into our reincarnatory plan. Then there are some that we ourselves, due to our imprudence, due to our lack of experience, due to oftentimes our rebelliousness, we cause. But let's talk first about the kind that we have to endure as a part of just the growth process. Now, both of these experiences obviously are options for growth or opportunities for growth, but we don't have to suffer as much as we do. Take my 1.5-year-old son. How many times the other day, and probably it'll continue for quite some time, I had to keep telling him, don't jump off the couch and do a somersault. You're going to hit your head. And I repeatedly do this, and I have to, we go through this dance of me going close to him and holding him, and then he cries, and then, we get into the struggle, and then it's like, okay, let him do it, but don't let him die, but let him do a little bit so he can get hurt a little bit, just so he can learn his lesson. So it's this constant dance, and finally I was looking at this and thinking about it from a life perspective, that this is us, that we are so hell-bent on doing what we think is the right thing to do, or we are so rebellious against what is actually happening to us that we don't trust the process. We don't trust that God has a divine design, that we fight it. And it makes it so much worse for us. And we struggle so much more, and we go through so much more pain because of that. So part of that is because it is part of our growth process. We are all under we all pertain, or we all take part in the law of progress, as well as in the law of destruction. We must get rid of the old parts of us and embrace this new process of growth. And sometimes that is painful, if not most times, if not always. But the beautiful thing about Spiritism is that it can console us. But the thing that people get most confused about is that they think that it's going to take away your pain, and it does not. Our pain remains. Well, what Spiritism does for us, and what this consoling message, what God does for us, is brings us this peace to know that we're not alone. So when I'm there with my son, as even after he falls, and I'm seeing that and hoping he's learned his lesson, but I'm there to hold him through it and wipe his tears and tell him, it's okay. This is life. You fall, you get up, you might fall again. And that's God's perspective of us as well. He's there holding us, and we just need to tune into that. And to address the second part of the question, Can you address the notion that we suffer, that what we suffer is often caused by our actions within this lifetime? Yes. Yes, much like a teenager. I'm sure all of us have passed through that phase. Maybe some are still in this phase, or it's more prolonged. I know sometimes I feel like I'm still in that phase, and we're rebellious. And we think that we know more. We know what's best for us. We know all there is to know, like a teenager, if you've ever had a teenager in your life or can recall being one. But the reality is that God, in his infinite wisdom, I'm using the pronoun his, but his, her, doesn't matter. In his infinite wisdom, knows and sees all. And if we can just tap into that and say to ourselves, to our soul, God, I know you got my back, then we can find more peace. But the times when we are just making mistakes because we're imprudent, because we are not paying attention, we are not living our lives intentionally, we are not living our lives with purpose. And that's why pain comes and knocks on our door and says, hello, wake up. Because we live in a world of consequences. Thank God, because then it wakes us up. So what half of the pain that we endure in this life, we cause. Something for us to think about, to be more conscientious of how we live our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Often when we insist on rebelling, it can be a source of unhappiness as well as all kinds of struggles.
Yes.
Okay, next question is for Suzana. Suzana, what is the definition of disincarnation?
Hi, disincarnation. So in the summary, I was saying that is one of the, great things about Spiritism is that it actually makes this difference between, the death of the physical body and the separation of the spirit from the physical body. So when you say that someone passed away, what you mean is that the physical body is no longer alive. But it does not mean necessarily that the spirit has actually fully detached from the physical body. So this incarnation speaks about this process, the process of detachment of the spirit from the physical body. And we know that when we incarnate, when we enter the body, so to speak, there is an attachment that takes place from the perispirit, our spiritual body, to the molecules, to the cells of our physical body, cell by cell. There is a linkage, a bond that is established. So once the life comes to an end, there's the cessation of life, then these bonds need to be undone. And so this incarnation speaks to this process, how this process happens, the phases, what are the components of the process. And as we mentioned before, it is usually a very, very gradual process. Actually, I like to think that we start to die from the moment we are born. And this is something that is, it's actually, I'm going to say nice to think about, in the sense that it helps us to live according to what the purpose of our lives truly is, which is we immerse in the physical body, in the material world, to learn to detach from it. We immerse in matter to learn what is really valuable for our lives. So if we live each day with the perspective that we are discarnating, in the sense that each day we have a little bit less vitality, each day we're using a little bit of the vital fluid that we are given to incarnate, which is our our tank full of gas. If you think of a car, using analogies here, each one of us is given a tank. We have different size of tanks. Some have truck tanks. Some have like, big old tanks, like little tanks. But we all come in with a full one, and we start to spend that vitality little by little, and that helps together with many other components with the detachment. So I don't want to extend myself. The simply definition is, it speaks to the separation of the spirit to the physical body.
Okay, thank you very much, Suzana. Next question for Marcia. Marcia, according to Spiritism, what is the definition of trial and atonement?
In the question, just wanted to be very, I guess, very academic here, because we can just define what is trial and atonement from the sense of it is a process by which we define our lives, right? The material life, and I would like to maybe go back to what Suzana was saying just now, from the detachment from that, right? But it can simply be saying that those are part of the tribulations, if you will, that is life as we live in our corporeal existence. So in other words, trials can be seen as the learning situations, right? So as we go through this trial or a mission, some people call it a trial, a test, or a mission, we are learning, we are ensuring that through that we are growing, our spirit is growing. Expiation, or some of us will see as the world of trial and atonement, as you said, Peter, can refer instead no longer the growing, right? The future look of growing, becoming more, becoming better as a spirit. The point of expiation is really a process, and it's really important to know this process is actually a forced process. No one can escape that, but it's imposed by the law of cause and effect. And it's that process that our spirit, ourselves, are confronting the consequences of all our choices, right? Back to Kirsten, her one-year-old son is having to confront the choice, his freedom to keep doing somersaults in the sofa, right, Kirsten? But it is a natural consequence that he indeed may fall, and as he may fall, he may hurt himself, and it may be painful process. But from an expiation atonement proper, it's as I am confronted to my choice, then I will have to understand in this process, do I understand that I've done something wrong, right? Am I ready to learn from these mistakes, to expiate, and undo whatever I've done that may have caused with my choice? So the somersault may have caused I don't know, but the sofa to be ripped, something of that sense. And those are the corrective measures that we have to take as a spirit responsible for our free will, or the results of our free will. But I wanted to go back to what Suzana said, because she mentioned, I love it, by the way, Suzana, that dying, right, is a process that each day, the minute we're born, we start to die. And the process from a learning perspective is the process that we are pushed, right, to detach from matter, from a material existence. And I think it's important to think of that, because the notion or the discussion on death and discarnation, it goes very much in parallel with the notion of in life, in living, we are put into an incarnation, right, to go through those trials and expiations, but we go through that quite well as we start to detach ourselves from the constraints of the body, of that immersion to the physicality and the material existence that often dulls our senses, right? We become so attached in life, in this immersive experience, that we forget who we truly are, which is to be an immortal spirit. But thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Okay, Cynthia, next question. Why should we, immortal spirits living in a material existence, require wealth? What is the Spiritist view of wealth?
Okay. Thank you. Excuse me. I would like to start by expanding a little bit, or maybe making ourselves, making let's put everybody on the same page as to wealth is here, and expanding a little bit so that I think I would like to convey an answer for this. And so wealth here, let's have in mind that wealth here will not necessarily translate to only material financial means, right? Wealth could be education, could be intelligence. It could be all of those things, not only financial means to obtain material needs. And for one, we live in a material world that when we are incarnated, as we all are now, and we need material things, right? But we also need education, intelligence, and all of that. Well, this being said, we need to acquire, right, wealth. We need wealth because we need to satisfy our physical material needs of a material world, of earth, right? So for that, when we are put in this world, we need to go out there. The reality is that things are not given to us. We need to go out there to the world and get things for us, right? We need to find water. We need to eat. We need food, and we need a lot of other things too. So we human beings need to acquire all of these things, and the need to acquire these things will make us develop our intelligence. And we also learned that in time, our moral side, our moral aspect, our morality will come along. Typically, the intellectual aspects, the intellectual development takes place before our moral development takes place. So the reason why we should acquire, if we put it in a very simple way, wealth is to satisfy the needs that we have. Unfortunately, human beings are very ambitious, too ambitious, right? And they go out to acquire real wealth, financial wealth. And the word require, I also think it's not, if we see it in the sense of wealth being more than just financial means, yes, it is required because we need to satisfy our material needs, right? But let's not just keep that wealth, that requirement to have wealth as a requirement to have a lot of material possessions. And the main goal here is for us to develop our intelligence. And with time, we will also develop our morality. As I mentioned in the beginning, in the summary of the lesson, Inequalities of Wealth, we need to learn how to deal with different circumstances that life brings us, right? And we could go back all the way to primitive times when we were very little, very not so much different from our from from primates, right? We were not very much different. So the difference mainly was we had some intelligence and they didn't, and we developed that. So it's easy for us to see then the use of that intelligence that we had to develop in order to cover ourselves, to find shelter, to find food, right? And this continues. We go from that point in time until now. If we look 10 years back, for instance, there were so many things that we didn't have. Even here, we would not be probably here using StreamYard. We might be using Skype or something like that. Today, the need for everything and the pandemic was, I like to cite this example, right? Caused men and women to use their intelligence to obtain many more things. The cell phone, TV, we are now going to space, right? In a few minutes. So this was all caused by the needs to satisfy our material needs that caused us to develop our intelligence, right? As to the reasons why immortal spirits need to do that, is because we need to evolve. As we said in the beginning again, we are immortal spirits in a constant evolutionary journey, and we have to learn everything in order to achieve relative perfection. It is impossible to obtain that in one existence. So in each different existence, we will acquire different experiences, different virtues. We will rid ourselves from vices. And that is one of the reasons for us to require, if you will, right, that wealth. And again, wealth not being the material needs, the material possessions, but all a plethora of other virtues, of other elements, such as intelligence, right? And the second part of the question, right, is it is what is the Spiritism view of wealth? As we also mentioned in the summary, it is a tool that God uses to test us, but not for merely testing us, but also for us to learn. Is a way for us, is a tool for us to learn what we need to keep evolving, right? And with that, we never go back. We simply go forward, because we need to deal with and learn how to deal with the challenges of different aspects that come to us. Wealth is also, in the views of Spiritism and also a Christian view, is a tool that is given to man to help not only one individual or a few, but to help society as large. Wealth is a way of controlling poverty. When used well, when used well in accordance to the divine will, wealth will be beneficial to many human beings, to society as at large.
Thank you, Cintya. I like how you stress that wealth is a tool and certainly not a way of defining ourselves. Okay, next question. This is actually a question that Suzana posted, and we'll ask Kirsten to comment on this, and then if any of you, either Cintya or Marcia or Suzana, want to elaborate, please do. So, Kirsten, some think that Spiritists are masochists and love suffering. Is there any truth to this statement?
Is there truth to that statement? Perhaps. Our perspectives are our realities. And for someone standing outside, might be looking in at us and think, gee, they must really like suffering. They seem to want to embrace it. So perhaps there's truth to that from whomever is the one looking. And so perhaps, however, nobody likes suffering. Nobody enjoys it, or wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, how can I suffer today?" Rather, I would say we try to understand our suffering. We try to understand the pain that we endure. And for those of us who have experienced immense, soulful, dark moments of the soul and have been able to cling to your faith, to our belief that God is in charge, there is a peace that washes over us. And until you've known that peace, until you've felt that, it might not be real to others who've never experienced it. So from the outside, someone might think that, wow, she just must love suffering and she just wants to endure it all. But one thing perhaps we don't do a good enough job of, and maybe this is why some might think us as masochists, is we don't find the joy in life. We don't know how to embrace the joy. It's hard for us to fathom and to process the idea of the duality of being able to say, this sucks and I'm sad, but life is also awesome and there's so much beauty in it. And being able to give space to both of those parts of ourselves allows us to be a more fuller human being. Because I can be sad. I can be sad about things, but I also can be happy. And I can enjoy life still. So I'm going to throw this question back out there to the rest of you. And not only would I like to hear back from my comrades, my colleagues here, but Suzana, I want to hear what you have to say.
Sure. So I just felt like your first answer, which I absolutely loved, and I just felt the need to explore a little bit more, given the level of pain and suffering the world is experiencing right now, and how I have actually heard that statement from Americans in our group, people who are coming in, and it's like, oh my God, you guys always talking about suffering. You must love to suffer. And so I had experiences where people had this perception. Um, and so that's kind of why I want to stir the pot a little bit and kind of get a little bit more into it. So yeah, I think the one message that we perhaps um, need to put out there is that the primary purpose of Spiritism is to help us to live with less suffering, with less pain, by the construction of positive karmas, by abiding to God's laws, and bringing light into our lives. And yet we have a difficult idea, a difficult time understanding the concept of pain. And I really like to split it in three different ways when I think about it. I think about the growth pain, right? The natural pain that comes with growth. Like when our kids and ourselves, when we were kids, get up in the middle of the night and say, Mommy, my legs are hurting. From what? Now it's growth pain, right? So there's no clear reason other than you're growing. And and it's funny because we are very accepting of this type of pain in our physical realm. So for example, you are willing to undergo muscle soreness in order to get stronger, faster, fit. You're willing to undergo the pains of missing on a weekend and giving up rest in order to achieve a degree, for example, and to undergo all the trials that comes with that. But then when it comes to the path of enlightenment, we want to do it without pain. We want it to be painless. So it's natural. Pain is a natural outcome or tool for growth. And so what we do is we understand pain that way, and we embrace pain as, it is the outcome of challenging ourselves. The same way we challenge our physical body, we put strains on our physical body. They're actually beyond the body's ability to take. And the body, which is divine and intelligent, says, hey, this is more load than I can take. So my body is sore and I need to build a stronger structure to be able to undertake this load. So emotionally and spiritually, it's necessary for the same to happen. So life comes with natural trials that overload us spiritually so that we can build the spiritual muscle, the emotional muscle that will grant us to a different place. So I always like this perspective because it makes pain much more natural and desirable, in the sense that is something that is contributing to our spiritual growth, is our friend, is not our enemy. Now, suffering is a completely different story, right? Suffering is our inability to embrace the pain. And I agree with you, Kirsten. I think that when we undergo certain types of pains, so there's the natural pain of the growth process, there's the pain that comes with amendments. That's a little different. It hurts a little deeper. And then there's the pain that comes from the expiation processes. So it's when we are really resisting the learning. So three different levels of pain. Um, but as we undergo the amendment pain or the expiation pain, and we are able to be fully present to what life is trying to teach us, the transformative outcome is, it's incredible. I mean, if you're able to be open to the transformative process that goes within you, you can see that you have definitely crossed the bridge or reached the other side of the river, and be in a completely different space. So thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Suzanne. I like how you emphasize that it can be a transformative process.
Peter, can
Yeah.
I just add to what
Please
my
do.
colleague said, with
Yes,
which
thank
I totally agree.
Mhm.
I'd like to say to that particular point that you put there, right? Spiritism in its religious aspect, right? It did not come to establish new rules or new positions. It came to help us understand and interpret the lessons that Jesus left for us, right? Especially the Sermon on the Mount, right? And in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about the suffering and how to deal with it. So the way I see it for that proposition that was there is that that characterization may be right, as Kristen said, maybe from an outsider, from a viewpoint of someone that's looking just on the surface, will not. It may be so, but it's not exactly that. In fact, we learn how to deal with the challenges of life that cause pain, and look at them in a different manner, that we would not otherwise do. We would despair, we would stress too much, we would get too depressed. Not that these things don't happen. Spiritism does not remove any problems and trials and tribulations, but give us a different perspective from a viewpoint of the challenges and the pain that come with them, and that we need to work on everything. It's just in the dictionary that success comes before work, and that's basically what we learn, right? That we need to work on our imperfections, and that many times it goes against the interest, the earthly interest that we have, and that hurts. Other things that we do not control will also come along our way, and we learn with the elements that Spiritism gives us, right? By in its religious aspect, but also in the other ways, such as laws of cause and effect, right? The laws of the universe. I just wanted to add that 2 cents that I thought was useful here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cynthia. Marcia, do you want to weigh in on this question too, from the perspective of trials and expiation?
Right, Suzana, can bring so much color to this discussion. So thank you so much for that. And first of all, I wanted to say the concept which Suzana brought forth, right? Suffering and pain are two different concepts. And pain, the natural pain, is part of living, but the choice of how we handle the pain is that suffering is what's important. And Spiritism teaches so well with not only acceptance and resignation, but understanding that that spiritual pain that comes, that spiritual muscle, right? It requires a fortitude, a mental fortitude, which Jonah D'Angelo speaks quite well. I like to remind everybody here, because we're doing a study in the center that I lead, which is all about this. It's about the struggles. It's about undue complaint, and I won't go into that. I just wanted to take this moment from the lesson of trials and expiation, right? We speak specifically with the idea expiation or atonement can be understood as many as payback. And if we go into Eastern definitions of karma or payback, there is a sense of eye for an eye. If you hurt somebody, you have to suffer a hurt, and that's not what the Spiritism really teaches. Spiritism teaches in the process through, as you may recall what I said earlier, which is enforced. It's not something that we can say, no, I'll pass, but it's enforced through the law of cause and effect that we do confront the consequences of those spiritual failings, right? So it will have an impact. We are responsible to address those. And as such, it is up to us, again, using our free will, on how we're going to expiate, turn ourselves pure again by amending, by addressing that. And so when again Suzana, commenting to her own question, said Spiritism, the objective of Spiritism is actually to lessen our pain. It goes hand in hand with the notion that we can choose how we're going to amend, right? Repent and expiate and amend those failings, but also in how we go through that, understanding that it may cause certain pain, that spiritual muscle, but it's up to us on how strong, how much fortitude we may have in addressing those. There's so much we can talk about it. I'll go on to Peter, back to Peter, so that we have time for more questions.
Thank you, Marcia. Yeah, this is definitely a big subject. I mean, how we process what we experience in life in general, it leads to all kinds of questions.
Can I
Yeah,
add something real quick, Peter? This
Yeah.
wasn't my original thought, but to what Suzana said, there are different kinds of pains where we're working out, and then we have, pain afterwards the next day, and we're very accepting of the pain we even expected. We know how to mitigate it most times, and it's an external thing. But when we're experiencing that emotional pain, it's within us. It's something it's an internal experience that we have, and it really is about having a new relationship with ourselves and our different parts of ourselves. And that is incredibly scary. That is also perhaps part of the suffering in it all, because it's scary to face who we are. It's scary to face all the parts of us that we've pushed down or put aside or not wanted to deal with, or all the parts of us, much like the lobster, like we have created this shell of protection, and there comes a point where we need to shed it and say, okay, I need to grow, and this is going to hurt. but that is where the courage comes in, that we are able to draw from this divinity, that we can draw from this divinity. And if I may share this, a really very, 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 very quick experience that I shared with someone recently, who was diagnosed with cancer, and this person and I were swapping what some might call sob stories, but we were actually swapping stories of courage and how we endured and how much we experienced this sense of peace when we, in that moment, when we found out that our worst fear came to fruition, each of us having gone through a loss, that we both experienced this overwhelming sense of peace when we said, God, your will, not my will. And it's a different experience altogether. So it's very, is that a word? Experiential? I don't even know if that's a word in English. But it's an internal experience that we must have with ourselves. It is the epitome of get to know thyself, or know thyself, because really through pain, we are able to learn and get to know parts of ourselves we didn't know existed. And it's a beautiful, beautiful process that we can embrace it. Okay, I'm done. Sorry about that.
Experiential work. You could also say illuminating. All right. Thank you all for your thoughts on all this. Very interesting. Next question is for Suzana. Suzana, can you tell us about the process of separation of body and soul when we die? How does it happen, and what can be done for it to be a positive experience? Is there any help? If there is any help, how is spiritual assistance provided during this period?
Right. So it's a long question.
Yeah.
Let's go question by question.
Okay.
So first, the process of separation. So this is actually complex, and for anyone who wants to study further and understand the works of Andrew Lewis, is probably the place to go. But in kind of a brief way, as I mentioned before, one thing that's I think it's important to understand is, let me start with this: to die does not hurt. Since we're talking about pain, so one place where we're not gonna hurt is the moment we die. The spirits say that we usually sleep to die, so all the pain and suffering may come before that, but not actually during the dying process. Um, Second, it's the discarnation. The separation is a gradual process. So it's never abrupt. Like I said, it's a weakening of the bonds that happens over time. What we learn from Andrew Lewis' works is that the separation, it starts from the solar plexus, and that will affect, for example, the extremities of the body. So I'm Kirsten is a nurse. I'm a physical therapist. I do a lot of work for hospice. I work very closely with the end of life, and so when someone is getting close to the moment of the physical death, one of the first things that we see is the bluish color of the extremities, the coldness of the extremities, and that correlates to the disconnection of the solar plexus that actually relates to the limbs, and you start seeing the loss of life, so to speak, from the extremities, followed by the cardiac plexus. So we're going to see the presence of arrhythmias, for example, the heart kind of getting a little off balance there. And then finally, you're going to have the coronary plexus being the last one, which is, all the brain activity and things like that. So, and then, there's a really beautiful description in the works of Andrew Lewis of, a discarnation process where you see the perispirit, the physical body, kind of acquiring its full form. And then finally, you have the disconnection of the silver cord, which is the absolute end of the process. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of what the primary phases of the disconnection. The spirit will, most of us, given our stage of evolution, we will experience some confusion. And the best way I can describe this is, I used to be a big napper before I had my kids on the weekends. Love to like have a big lunch on Saturday and Sunday and then sleep for 2 hours. And we haven't done that in 13 years. But um, so when you wake up like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Sometimes I used to sleep so deep that I didn't know anymore if it was morning, afternoon, if it was Saturday or Sunday. And sometimes I didn't even know where I was. So, and that is what the spirits will share with us, that we wake up a little disoriented, not knowing exactly where we are. So we have this confusion, and we also have the review process, which basically, outside of the physical body, we have that kind of our lives kind of passes on in our own minds, and we're able to review every single moment, especially the moments that have been emotionally important, that had marked us because of the emotional content. So we review this review process can happen more immediately. Um, for someone, for some others, it happens a little later. There's not like a specific moment, from what I have gathered from the different cases that we have that I have read. So so those are some of the main phases. And then, can you put the question back for me, please? Okay. So, the positive experience, right? So, there are different factors that will affect how that experience takes place. And so let's take aging and illness. Although hard for us from the material perspective to see someone ill, but there is so much healing that takes place a lot of times with prolonged illness and with aging. What happens as we age is that we are less able to do, and it opens a window for us to be more. So the fact that we cannot do as much gives us a space to review and to reassess our values and what life is truly about. And the weakening of the physical body really, really prepares the spirit to enter the spiritual life. So, for example, um, and I'm talking about really old age. One of the things that happens, you lose your sense of taste. The elderly individual does not taste the same, does not have the same taste that we do. So they're not as interested in eating as we are. And if you think about it, that is a good thing, because you don't want to discriminate craving, a huge meal. It's not a good thing. So honestly, there are a lot of things, and I'm that's what I do. I work with geriatrics. There's a lot of things that change in the end of life that actually help us to pass away and to better adapt to our spiritual life. So aging, illnesses will help also weakening the physical body and weakening the bonds that attach the pure spirit. And then also, understanding, I mean, our knowledge that we have with the spiritism can be very, very helpful, preparing to pass, as well during the passing and as well after the passing. But you can have all the knowledge in the world and you can have all the perfect circumstances, but the primary thing that makes that experience easier or better for us is our moral evolution. And by that, I mean how much we identify with the material world. That is the key component. So you may not have any of those things, but you're someone who really live a life where you were a good person, you were interested in the well-being of others, and matter did not define you. For example, your worth was not on your physical body, your worth was not on your titles, was not on the things that you have, but you just had a sense of who you are and not need anything material for your own worth. You were much better prepared than anyone else. So that is the key component, and one that I mean we will help us the most at the end of our lives. I don't know if I responded every single aspect of that question.
Oh, I think you covered it very nicely.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question is actually, Suzana, can you take this one really quick? Question is, what is the Spiritist view of organ donations?
I'm going to throw it back to Kirsten.
Okay.
I have some ideas, right? But I haven't really read, and I don't even know if there is extensive. I know that Joanna might have some, and Kirsten might be aware of that. So Kirsten, go ahead.
So there actually is a few good talks online if MK wants to go and Google or look on YouTube for the Spiritist Medical Association for, oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking on her name. Sonia Doi. She gives a really good lecture specifically talking about organ donations and the Spiritist view on it. But very briefly, we encourage organ donation. It is great. As a matter of fact, if I can make a plug for it, in working in healthcare, there's not enough donations that are there. And by the way, you also can do what's called a living donation as well. You can Google, look into it, and there's a whole research you can do into it. But there are so many people that do need kidneys, livers, things that we can actually donate. You can't donate other things.
There's some questioning in regards to if you donate an organ, will that kind of harm your perispirit, for example, right?
No.
And we know that that's not true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
go ahead.
So definitely I'm not an expert on it by any means. And like I said, there's a really good lecture by Sonia Doi, Dr. Sonia Doi, by the way, is a physician. You can find it. It should be on YouTube. If not, I'm sure you can write into the United Spirits Federation. Maybe they can guide you to where the talk is specifically, because she goes more in depth to it. But to my understanding, there is no harm. If anything, it's a benefit, because even post-mortem, we are giving to someone else who is in need. So no, it's not going to affect our paraspirit. We're not going to go back to the spirit realm, and there's going to be a chunk of our paraspirit just missing, and we're walking around literally like holy. No, that doesn't happen at all. Quite the contrary. It's a benefit to others, and it's a benefit to us as well, because we are serving even in death. So
incredible selfless act of love.
Incredible.
And after all, if we have a good disincarnation, once we're done with the body, we're done with the body. So.
Yeah, ashes to ashes.
Cynthia or Marcia, do you want to weigh in on this?
No, I entirely agree. I'm not an expert whatsoever, but yes, from the premises and from what we studied, that benefits to others, right? What we can do to help others in life or death is something that could not be condemned, right? It could not be detrimental to the one that donates. So that's my particular thought, and I believe that that's what the literature that's out there, which is not many, But yes, I entirely agree with what they said.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Marcia.
Yeah, and I just want to say, just like Dr. Sonia Goyes has a lecture, there are other lectures on the subject, very specifically, and it's Cintya, not Guimaraes, but I believe her last name is Lemos. I'm blanking out on her last name. Did a beautiful lecture several years ago on this subject specifically, NK. But the concept, very simply, is as we remember, and I go back to you, Suzanne, as our vitality is diminished, as we approach our moment of death and discarnation, it's very much like that old shirt that you loved, right? And you used it and you used it and you used it. And at some point, it's just old. It has reached its life cycle. It's no longer usable. And it's okay perhaps to put in the trash, or how about that? Somebody who needs much more than you do can use that same shirt and move on to usability. So from a spiritist perspective, there is no perispiritual consequence of organ donation. And as Kirsten said, it's actually viewed as a very positive thing to be able to provide, to extend someone else's health and ability to live well on earth.
It's charity, right? It's a
Yes.
form of
Yes.
charity.
It is.
Yeah, a beautiful form of charity. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, MK, for that question. It was a good one. Okay, the next question. I believe this is going to be, let's see. Yes, this will be for Marcia. Why do we have to go through trials at this stage of our spiritual evolution?
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for the question, Peter. And I just want to say that as I mentioned right in the beginning, trials and is propelling us going forward. So think in terms of trials, forward looking, expiation, backwards looking. So trials is really a mechanism for us to achieve our full development, our full capability to live as an immortal soul. It's all about that sense of potentiality. It's our challenge. If I go back maybe to what Suzana mentioned before, right? The muscle, for us to become stronger, we have to go through some exercise, and that builds our strength physically. From our spiritual perspective, our trials is our, let's say, our weight regimen, our ability to go stronger. So the other thing that we see in this chapter by Teresina Oliveira's book is the fact that she refers to the idea that we would not have any merit in enjoying the benefits of that end goal, right? Perfect happiness, if we were not tested onto it. That would not be ours. So just real quickly, as a summary, we are here on earth, and we receive our trials, our tests, our missions as a learning opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to test if we have reached that immortal soul capability, or our abilities to live from a spiritual perspective. And we really demonstrate through those our competency. So again, to the question, why do we have to go through those trials? It's part of our path toward our growth, our enlightenment. And if you think in terms, as again, as an immortal soul, if you think in terms of life after life after life, meaning multiple incarnations, or our ability to be here as a reincarnated soul, we have our ability now to say, okay, past lives, past activities, past learnings, how am I going to demonstrate that we have attained our intellectual as well as moral progress. So you may remember when Cynthia here talked about it's easier first to attain intellectual progress, right, than moral. As we go through our trials, we are able to demonstrate both of them. And just to finalize, in the book, in this chapter of the book, which I highly recommend everyone to read, Teresia really zooms in that question of development. It's really that opportunity for us to develop. And if we stop to think about it, right? What if we did not learn, right? What if we were not challenged? Does it mean that we would not progress? And I would say, of course you would. You just would not be progressing as fast. Because, for example, if we take a moment perhaps to think about a most painful moments, the moments that is, it's so emotionally charged that every time we go back and remember that, we may have tears in our eyes. Those are the moments that we grew the most. We can recognize that when we do certain life reflections, right? And those are the moments that we had to learn. We had to prove that we had learned. And so I just go back to some of the books that, for example, Joanna DeAngelis, the spiritual author Joanna DeAngelis, brings to us, specifically her entire book on existential conflict. She talks about those trials, those tests that we go through as an opportunity for us to demonstrate that, hey, I have overcome. It is a complex part of my life. There has been a lot of difficulties, but by doing that, I've been able to climb to, let's say, the summit of Mount Everest, because now I'm strong enough and I'm able to climb all the way there, as a metaphor. So it's important for us to know that. And to me, it's the beauty of both Joanna DeAngelis' books, including this one, but also Spiritism as a whole, the whole body of knowledge that Spiritism brings to us, is that once we know that, we should ask ourselves, are we open to learn? And if so, let us learn deeply. Let us learn so deeply that the next trial that comes to us, it's easy, right? So that we can enjoy those benefits as we grow and that life grants to us through the opportunities of this incarnation. I hope this answered the question.
A great answer. Thank you, Marcia. It certainly, we should not equate trials and expiations as with masochism, as we were talking about before, but rather they are opportunities to learn. So, okay, next question. This is for Cynthia. Cynthia, what is the most difficult trial, wealth or poverty? Why is that?
Sure. Well, we see that Spiritism and the basic books, the codification teaches us that both of them are equally difficult, equally changing, equally challenging, and each of them present their hardship. And let's look at them a little bit in a separate way. If we are facing a situation of poverty, it is very easy to immerse in a state of lamentation, complaints about everything and everyone, including God. There could be their blasphemy, right? And this is something that it many times it's easier said than done, but that's what Spiritism is about. And we talked about this in one of the the questions and topics that we were discussing, right? What Spiritism brings to us. How should we see a situation? From what angle, right? How we can handle that, how we can understand and feel maybe less pain. But if one isn't immersed in a situation of poverty, one can be easily discouraged, dismayed with the constant lack of material means, with the constant shortcomings that a life of poverty can bring, right? And it's also in that situation, it's easy to develop jealousy, to develop anger, to develop other types of vices, to talk bad about the rich. And these are things that we should police and combat. I think we also talked about this. We should, when facing that type of situation, we should try to do what we also talked in the summary, which is we should try to learn how to produce things, how to create things, how to manage to the extent we can, right? It's also possible for a person that is in a situation of poor to give what? Give charitable love. And also maybe some material positions. There's not anyone that is so poor that cannot help someone that may have even less than that. But in the area of charitable love, for instance, we can give support, moral support to the one that needs. We can keep company to one that is sick and needs company, right? We can give sincere loyalty, loyal friendship to a person that needs, right? We can also volunteer, help, even with simple things. There are so many ways of practicing charitable love that is not necessarily only in material ways. Being faithful, being sincere, developing honesty, and not talk bad about the rich or think bad about it, criticize them. When in a situation of poverty, one should remember that the rich is also in a trial and not an easy one, right? And if a rich person is doing what they're supposed to do, is handling that gift of God, which is the wealth, in a way that is according to divine will, then that rich person should deserve our respect, right? On the other hand, if that person is not handling well the wealth and is being selfish, is being egotistical, that person deserves some mercy, compassion, and our prayers. On the other hand, if we're looking at, and there's so many other elements here, but to talk a little bit about poverty, right? A situation of poverty can, and I think it's easy for us to see that it can easily corrupt the spirit and enslave the person that enjoys wealth, right? Wealth typically goes hand in hand with power, and wealth and power are the quintessential exciters of the personality. They foster pride and selfishness, which can lead to indifference, to creating false needs, to trying to let me see how I'm going to put it. It creates these false needs, and it creates the desire for exacerbated well-being. There are all these things that can be caused by wealth, because wealth provides this limitless possibility to satisfy all of earthly pleasures, right? And all of these situations pride and selfishness, and focusing on all on the material things and immediate satisfaction of the senses, sensualism. All of these elements tie us to earth and distance us from the things of the spirit, which which naturally causes us to delay our spiritual evolution. So we have also to remember the persons that are rich, that have this gift of God, they have to remember that those material possessions do not belong to us here on earth. We are only the trustees of everything we have. And I go a little bit farther, not only the material possessions, but our intelligence and everything else that we conquer. We talked about expanding the definition here of wealth, of being not only those attributes, financial attributes, right? So we have to know that God is actually the owner of all of the gifts that he grants to us, all of them. We have to remember that Jesus said, right, do not accumulate treasures on earth where the insects, where moth and rust can destroy and the thieves can steal it, but accumulate treasures in your heart and in your soul also, right there, because there is where your heart is, and no moth will destroy, no rust will destroy, no thief is going to steal. And as we were talking about discarnation, when we go back, when we discarnate, nothing, absolutely nothing of our material possessions we're going to take with us. All we're going to take is our spiritual assets, is our heart assets. And I think that's there are other elements here, but I think that these are those that I'd like to emphasize for us here.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia, for your wonderful answer. All right, I'm afraid we are out of time and we need to wrap up. So thank you, everyone who watched this and who have been following our weekly releases of Initiation into Spiritism. Want to thank you, Kirsten, Suzana, Marcia, and Cynthia, for your time and participating in this program. Next month, we will cover the following topics, chapter 23 through 26. Louise Lima will be doing chapter 23, a study about baptism. Louise Valasa will be covering chapter 24, Asleep in Dreams. Some guy named Peter Hayes, I guess that would be me, is covering chapter 25, Without Charity, There is No Salvation. And finally, Tanya Schwartz will be covering chapter 26, Prayer. Thank you all once again. Next Sunday, we look forward to hearing from Louise Lima, who will be speaking about the subject of baptism. And we will conclude with a final prayer. So if you are able to, please close your eyes. Dear God, dear Jesus, our dear beloved mentors, we thank you for your help and your assistance. We thank you for this opportunity. We thank you all who've participated. May all of us do our best each and every day to learn the lessons that come before us. May we do our best to facilitate the processes that we go through with as much peace and serenity as possible, and with the strength and the courage that we need. And when we are truly tested, may we do our best to get through it, but may we also appreciate that each and everything we go through is a lesson. We thank you, dear God, for the gifts you have given us. We thank you, dear Jesus, for your guidance and your wisdom. May peace be available to all, and may all of us kindle the light within us so that we can send the light outward. Amen.
So be it.